Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, big surprise. The number of people that are interested. I wonder what's going on in organisations today. That
everybody wants a PMO. That's fine.
That's what we like to see. We're going to turn the webcam off shortly. It's just to make sure that you can see us. We're really here, and we're going to be talking to you over the next hour and a bit about setting up a PMO. Yeah, I think as we go through this session, you'll be able to see using GoToWebinar that you're able to ask questions. Sometimes we think it's best if we can pick questions up as we go through the relevant bits that we're talking about. So feel free, we'll be able to see those questions coming up. And just to let you know that if we can't answer your specific question, maybe it's just slightly out of what we're talking about, just be aware that we will get back to you because we'll have your details in order to be able to answer you. And to first question many people have is, will the slides be available? Yes, they will. Hopefully you'll like them enough to want them. But I do realise it's also being recorded and you will be able to listen to this session again. And also, obviously, share it with anybody else within your organisations or friends or colleagues or anything like that. Enjoy it, really. So we're going to turn off the webcam so we're not distracting you with our wonderful faces. Let's just, before we crack on, just a little bit about the pair of us, really. Eileen?
Okay, so my name is Eileen Roden. You'll spot the difference when we speak because we've both got regional UK accents from different parts of the UK, so you'll be able to tell when I'm speaking and when Lindsay's speaking. So I'm Eileen Roden. I'm those people who in the PMO world may know me as the P3O lead author from the last version of the P3O. I have worked in project management and then fell into a project management office, thought I'd died and gone to heaven and have never looked back since. So I've spent most of my working career actually working in a PMO as a PMO manager, or for the last few years now working as a trainer and consultant with a range of eclectic clients who do a whole range of different project and program management activities.
And I'm Lindsay, and I've been working with Eileen for a number of years. We actually met through a PMO specialist interest group many years ago. We've both worked in the PMO field before going on to basically start businesses, a number of businesses really. I've been in project management recruitment. I've started PMO Flash Mob a number of years ago, which is obviously all about PMOs. I also still keeping and getting into careers stuff around project management. I do write the careers advice columns for PMI's Network magazine, and just generally just been setting up businesses and doing stuff around PMOs for a while now, and I suppose together we were quite lucky that we bumped into each other all those years ago. And
I'm still speaking.
Still speaking. So I think it's in terms of the session tonight, setting up a PMO. It's hopefully you'll get just a slightly different flavour. You've obviously seen the objectives of what we're going to be doing this evening. We'll take a look at those now, just so you know what to expect over the next hour or so. So we're going to be looking at, first of all, what kind of PMO is required. We're going to be talking about, rather than thinking, I think a lot of the time people want to dash straight into what do I need to do to set up a PMO. There's quite a lot of thinking that goes on before you get to that point where you want to roll up your sleeves and actually get on and actually do things. So Eileen will be taking us through the majority of what kind of PMO is required. Then we'll look at what resources are needed to implement a PMO successfully. So there's a number of things there that not just about people. So there's a classic saying with setting up a PMO that it's all thinking about people, process and technology. And then we'll also share some stuff around the kind of skill sets and the kind of people required to make a PMO work, setting one up and making it work. And as like anything that you're doing, especially around setting up a PMO, is having to understand how to measure its success. There's a lot of things that, that mean that, when an organisation is looking to set up a PMO for the first time, there's a number of reasons why they want to do that, and Eileen will talk through some of those. But what is a lot more crucial, and is certainly something that we've been doing a lot through things like PMO's flash mob, is turning that conversation to talking about metrics and measures, because ultimately organisations need to know that if you're setting up a PMO, that you're going to get a return on that investment. So we'll also be talking about measuring success. So before we get into the actual bones of it, we also wanted to just ask a couple of questions, just to understand, who's on the call and things like that, just to help us. And we've just been a little bit nosy, really. So the first question that I want to ask you is, do you work within a PMO? I know we saw some of the polls there about who's on the call, but just because you're a project manager or a program manager doesn't mean to say that you are not actually working within a PMO structure. I think the question still applies, doesn't it, really?
Absolutely.
So do you work within a PMO? And that in itself is the term PMO. What does it stand for? Again, Eileen will be we're talking through the different types of PMOs that do exist. So we should be able to close the poll, I think. We've probably got a number of responses there that will make it worthwhile. Yeah, we should be able to share that with you. Yeah, there you go. Not bad split, that, really.
50-50, near enough.
Yeah, near enough. Okay, so that's great. And I just want to ask one more question. So just bear me a second. We're going to go on to the second question, which is always an interesting one when you've got a lot of project people together. Which area of P3M do you actually work within? We call it P3M, just to, as a catch-all, really, for the different areas that you could be working within in terms of project management, projects, programs, and portfolios being the three.
Indeed.
So we'll just let you have a few more moments, and perhaps not totally surprising.
I'm quite surprised there's quite a few people at portfolio level. I was probably expecting a bigger split of project and programs. What is fascinating is over the last 3 to 4 years, how much portfolio management has become front and centre in organisations' views of the changes that are happening in their organisation. So perhaps I shouldn't quite be surprised.
Yeah, well, I was just going to share those results with you now, so you can see who else is on your on the session with you. The project management, projects, should I say, 43%. But yeah, I suppose you're quite right. I think if you'd gone back about 5 years or so,
there would have been an awful lot of I suspect a lot more of just project programs have definitely come up, but portfolio management is definitely, as I say, front and centre in a lot of organisations now.
Yeah. Okay, so Eileen, let's move on and look at the what kind of PMO is required.
Okay, so one of the conversations we've had, I think, several times before, between us and with our clients as well, what does the P stand for in terms of PMO? And I think we're at a position now where PMO actually just stands for PMO. We've kind of lost its link to an acronym, and it actually still means multiple things, but it covers any and everything. So when we're setting up a PMO in our organisations, just because it's a PMO doesn't necessarily answer what that PMO is going to be set up to do. So there are some kind of standard terminologies that are used and also misused. So I'm going to talk about them in the kind of the context that we use them in terms of the competence framework and the things that we do within each of those offices. But we'll also talk about some of the other names that PMOs are used for. So, funny enough, first one at the top of the list is a portfolio office. Now, we think of a portfolio office as an office where there are services provided across the organisation or across a division or a department that support the senior execs to understand the investment in projects and programmes and understand the link through to strategy. So this is very much a kind of central point of the organisation. with some very specific services that are provided, and with a particular type of resource sitting there at the portfolio office, and obviously with a level of credibility with the organisation, and often with an awful lot of business experience and not just programme and project management experience. So interesting in terms of the number of organisations now who have a recognised portfolio office, where it's not necessarily delivering support to projects and programmes, it's actually delivering services direct to the C-suite in terms of their understanding and support of delivering the portfolio and strategy. A programme office is an office that delivers service to a programme. So if you're working in a particularly large programme, you may well have a dedicated programme office. Now, a programme office, its real function is to support the programme manager into delivering whatever's required from a programme management perspective. There are very few programme managers who are superhuman and can actually undertake all of the programme management activities across their programme. So very often when we talk about the programme management team, we include the people in the programme office who are supporting from planning to resource management to risk management, issue management, methods, quality and performance across the programme. The one that a lot of people have heard of is a project office. And again, we have that kind of misused, and it means an awful lot of things. But a project office is simply an office that offers services to an individual project. So it may not necessarily be there full time or all the time, but it's assigned and it delivers services to the project manager. And again, similar to the programme office, it's supporting the project manager in all of the project management activities. Now, the interesting thing is that not every project is big enough to actually justify having a project office. And because often when we think about office, we think a group of people sitting in a room, but often we have project office services delivered by a more central office, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But when we talk about project office, we're delivering services into a project. Now, the fourth kind of office, it doesn't really have office in its title at all. It's called a Centre of Excellence. And I'm always reminded of the individual who said to me, before you call yourself a Centre of Excellence, make sure you're actually excellent. Otherwise, you are open to bricks being thrown. So the important thing about the Centre of Excellence is really the standards office. This is the place where we decide on how projects and programmes, portfolio standards, processes, templates are being delivered. And usually the people in there in the Centre of Excellence are a bit more experienced on projects and programmes. They understand the politics of the organisation and they understand how to align, the project processes along with the business as usual processes such as HR, finance, etc. and procurement. Now, what we've said is there are essentially 4 different types of office. And often in organisations, we don't actually create offices for each of those 4 different types of services that are offered. Very often we will have a single office that delivers all of those types of services. So we'll have a single central office, often called an EPMO or an organisational portfolio management office, where they deliver portfolio office services, programme office services, project office services, and Centre of Excellence services. So the name doesn't necessarily tell what that office does, but it's useful when we're starting to think about setting a PMO up, whether we're offering portfolio level services, programme level services, project office services, or Centre of Excellence services. Now, the interesting thing is there are also a whole range of other names that have been used across organisations. So again, PSO often was Project Support Office, PPSO, Programme and Project Support Office. I'm not going to go through them all. A couple of ones that are probably worth mentioning is the CPMO, so organisations who don't necessarily call everything a project or a programme now have change and project management officers, or APMO, which is an agile PMO. Now, my argument would be is that regardless of the type of initiative that you're looking after, understanding whether you're dealing with portfolio level services, programme level services or project services gives you a much clearer view of the types of services that you're going to be delivering, but also the types of customers that you're going to have for your PMO. So be clear. That's the first thing really to kind of understand and be clear about. Now, there are an awful lot of PMOs in the organisation that are manned by really enthusiastic PMO individuals who've read lots of textbook, or like me, have written a number of textbooks and are very keen to tell the organisation what they should have in their organisation. And even if we've not kind of hugely experienced, we've worked in a PMO that was in a different organisation, and we're very keen to replicate the success we had in a previous organisation. What's really important to recognise is it's not about us. It's not about us in the PMO having a PMO because we need a PMO. It's there because what we're trying to do is answer a need for the organisation. We are there to support the organisation in the delivery of their projects, programmes and their overall portfolio, and making sure it's balanced against their business as usual activity to deliver the overall success for the organisation in terms of their strategy. So the interesting thing about when we talk to the organisation, we talk to the business, and they understand, they're trying to explain to us what they might need. Very often they will not talk to us in project language or PMO language. They'll not say to us is, we need a detailed risk management process that concentrates on risk identification and has a good amount of risk mitigation using the Monte Carlo analysis. And you kind of think, well, how am I supposed to understand what we're meant to be doing in the PMO if they're not going to talk to us in how and what we deliver? And what they will tell us, and we did an interesting study a few years ago through PMO Flash Mob about those organisations who'd implemented effective portfolio management from their PMO. And all of the people who we talked to said nobody in their organisation had come and said, please can you implement portfolio management? They would talk to the PMO manager or the PMO director in terms of their business issues. So they would say things like, we seem to be spending an awful lot on projects, but we're really struggling to understand where that money goes to and whether we get any return. We're really struggling to understand, kind of which parts of the strategy are going to be delivered and which ones we're going to really struggle with. So they're going to talk to us in business language, and we need to understand how we can translate them into the services that we can deliver from a PMO that can support them. So, for example, a typical challenge of the C-suite is we've got a whole range of projects and programs that the senior managers have come to us and said, we want to this included in our budget for next year. How on earth are we going to kind of work through them in order to decide which ones will contribute most to our strategy or help us move forward the most? And what we do from then is we can kind of say, well, that's okay. We can put in place a project portfolio matrix that we can kind of work through, which will give an indication of which of those projects and programs are going to be added value. That will help you, give you some further information to help you understand which projects contribute to which of the various aims of your strategy. The important thing is that the decision is still with the senior execs in terms of what projects and programs they can deliver. So what we're doing is providing them with information that can help them make a more informed decision. I mentioned there particularly about portfolio management, and I think when we recognise across the whole Centre of Excellence projects, programmes and portfolios that there are a whole variety of stakeholder needs that we could address. And what we've got up there is a list of, I think it's 30, she says quickly doing the count, 30 different stakeholder needs that are identified in the PMO value ring. That is the PMO Global Alliance method for looking and setting up the right services in your PMO. And what we can see from some of those services that, yes, we've got some stakeholder needs come from senior executives. We've also got some stakeholder needs from programme managers. So perhaps we want better availability of lessons learned from one project to another project across my programme. We've got some needs and stakeholder needs from project managers about better allocation of resources across individual projects, because I never seem to get a decent set of project resources to help me with my projects. And I think the thing to recognise is that even if we're running a project office delivering services to our projects, we may still have some stakeholders, senior executives, or at the programme level, who will require information from us sitting at a project office. So just because we're supporting a project doesn't mean we only look at the project team for their wants and requirements from the PMO. I think the other important thing to recognise is that it isn't just the delivery teams that will have requirements from the PMO. We also need to look at the various functional areas across the business. We also need to look at business as usual, so those people who will be receiving the outputs or the outcomes being delivered by projects and programmes, because they may want to see better visibility of when projects are going to impact their individual departments across the organisation. So we have a wide and diverse set of stakeholders that we need to address and make sure that we optimise the services that we provide. So like many departments in the organisation, we won't necessarily be able to satisfy all of our stakeholders, but with some careful stakeholder analysis, we can prioritise and do the ones to our key stakeholders. So in terms of setting up the PMO, it's important that the leadership team and the delivery teams determine the PMO mandate, what is that they want us to achieve, and the PMO manager and their team then develop a business plan to deliver that PMO mandate. So we look at how we're going to deliver that, what services we need to provide, and typically we will have that formally documented within a PMO mandate, so we can see and be clear to all of our stakeholders what it is we're there to deliver. And again, when we start our PMO mandate, it shouldn't be looking at the kind of go straight into the services. It should be, we are here to solve some business problems. We're here to sort out some of the headaches that we have across the organisation. And some of those headaches might be in relation to project and programme delivery and understanding some of the key challenges. But it's there to say we're here to solve the problems. We have a mission for our PMO. We're here to kind of solve those problems. We're here to provide information so we can make better decisions. And our mission is going to be improve the delivery of every project and programme across the organisation that contributes to strategy. We set some very specific goals and objectives that are aligned to those business problems that allow us then to determine the value to the business. And what we're going to talk about, specifically Lindsay's going to pick up as we go through into that final section, is how we measure value to the business. How do we determine how we're contributing to overall business success? When it comes to actually delivering and doing the job of a PMO, you'll notice that I've mentioned a few times that I've talked about delivering services. Now, there is a big difference between a support-based and a service-based PMO, regardless of the level you're working at. At a support-based PMO, we are quite general and say we are here to support the project programmes and portfolios. We will do as we are asked to do, obviously often on a kind of a piecemeal basis. They come along as they need things, they come and ask us for them. Unfortunately, that can end up being a little bit inefficient. So let me just give you a quick analogy of what that is like. That's like having your kitchen at home. And the things that you can serve up from your kitchen are dependent on the food you've got in the cupboard, your fridge and your freezer, and the skills and capability of you or the other people in the household as a chef. So I come and say, please can I have some cheese on toast? The chances are you could probably rustle that up. If I come along and say, can I have duck l'orange? You may have to say, well, I'm sorry, we don't necessarily have the ingredients in to cook that, or we don't have the skills and capabilities to be able to serve that meal up. If we look at a service-based organisation, it's very much like going to a restaurant. And a restaurant is kitted out very differently to our kitchens at home, both in terms of the ingredients that they have, in terms of the skills and capabilities they have. So they decide on what menu they want to have available. They have within their cupboards and their pantries and their fridges the specific ingredients that can pull together the menu that has been offered, and they also ensure that they have the skills and capabilities within the kitchen to be able to deliver the dishes on that menu. And so there has been a gradual kind of move from PMOs being seen to be just we there to deliver support, anything and everything you ask for, to being much more service-based, where we agree as part of understanding the business problems what the specific services are that we can offer to address those problems, and we are very clear and get formal agreement in the mandate about what those services are. So there are a whole range of services that we can deliver. So we've just, I realise they're not ideally to read. It's not really to kind of for you to read each individual one. You can find all of those three in the back of the P3O manual. So there are a whole range of different services that we can provide. And even when we think about something like risk management, we can provide those services at project level, at programme level, at portfolio level, and there are also centre of excellence services that we'll provide. So there's quite a matrix of each of the different types of PMO versus the services that are going to be offered. And our mandate should give us the authority to undertake those services, and within the mandate we should be able to demonstrate how those services address the business problems. So when we've agreed the resources that are actually needed to implement, when we've agreed the services that we're going to provide, we need to think about what resources we need to implement that successfully and deliver those services. And as Lindsay's already mentioned at the very beginning of the talk, we need to think about people, process and technology. And it's very similar when I think about project management. We often meet people and talk to organisations, and they say, well, we've trained everybody in project management and perhaps they're still not delivering what we expect them to deliver. And you say, well, actually, have you got all of the other things in place, the process and the technology, to support the project management processes that the project manager knows what they need to do in order to deliver their project? So from a PMO capability, if we want to introduce the capability, as we mentioned before, to be able to assist the organisation to prioritise their individual projects and programmes so they can select which ones they want to do, we need individuals with a range of competencies. And from the organisation, we need some infrastructure, the right culture and the right resources. And that can include anything from tools and techniques, it can include data, it can include access to systems. And I think the important thing that we've also got in there is this organisational culture. It's very difficult to deliver any project programme in your PMO when the organisation really doesn't have any understanding of what the PMO can deliver and how it's going to help. So there is often, before we can deliver a PMO successfully, a wider education across the key stakeholders for them to recognise how the PMO can help them and get them set up. What Lindsay's going to take you through now is about the individuals, the people who work in and around the PMOs, and how we make sure we have the right set to deliver the services for the organisation.
I certainly will, but we've actually had a question in
Have we?
Yeah, we have. So when you were talking about the mandate and the services, somebody's asked about how often would you suggest that you review that?
So we're not talking about it tonight, but we do have, we've written a book called PMO Principles. So there are 7 key principles that underpin the setup of your PMO, and one of those is one of the is alignment, which is exactly what we've talked about so far, which is about making sure the services that we pick when we're doing the initial setup of the PMO match the business problems that we're addressing. Now, hopefully, as we go through the life of the PMO, that we solve some of those problems and new problems will come up. So we should be doing one of the other principles is continuous improvement. However, there is a time and a place to do a complete review of the services that we're provided. I'm busy delivering a course this week, actually, and one of the things that we're talking about, if you're in a program office, right at the very beginning of the program, you have to recognise that your program office is going to close, because at the end of the program, that particular program will no longer need a program office. So we already know at the very start of our journey that the services that we're going to provide throughout the program are going to change. So we should have this concept of a plan for our program management office to say at the start, when we're starting to kick off and starting to do the initial phases, and we're doing our target operating model and our blueprint, we offered some different services to when we're in the first tranche of the program and we've got our first projects being kicked off, to at the point where we're starting to transition some of those deliverables into business as usual. That will have some different services that need to be required. And as we're getting towards at the end of the program, we will be doing some reviews of projects, and we'll also start thinking about closing down the program. So you're already should have a view as you go through the various life of your program, your PMO is going to have offering different services. If you're working at a portfolio level, then typically, again, you've got your continuous improvement and you're checking your alignment. And the most obvious times where we do a complete review of the services that we offer at portfolio level typically are at an organisational change. So that can be a change in a senior member of the organisation. We have some different views and some different needs and requirements. It will also be if we've got a departmental reshuffle, some new departments being opened and shut, that will be part of that. And often, and we were just talking about this week, now we've actually hit 2020, everybody's 2020 strategy seems to have disappeared, and all of a sudden we're now seeing 2025 strategies and 2030 strategies. And definitely when we're doing a new strategy, we should be looking at the services we're providing across the organisation in terms of portfolio, project and programme to make sure they're aligned to that new organisation structure or that new strategy.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a long answer, but
deserved it. It was a good question.
It was a good question. So as Eileen said, we're going to change the pace a little bit, because it's my favourite bit, is talking about the people aspects of PMO. As I mentioned before, I had worked in recruitment for a long time around recruiting PMO people, and been doing it for such a long time, but there's just so many differences that we've seen over the years. And if we look at the different types of people that are working within PMOs that make them successful, not only in setting up a PMO, but also running and working within a PMO, there are different types of roles that do exist. There's always been quite interested in terms of the marketplace, is that you tend to see different types of people that might be involved in the setup of a PMO, but not necessarily the same people or the same roles that are actually running that PMO. So straight away, you automatically get some different types of people within the marketplace with a slightly different type of skill set. I mean, what you're looking at there at the moment is a big, good old list of different types of people that work within a PMO. So you have the general, the PMO manager and the PMO coordinator, people that are working and supporting projects and programs. You have more specialist skills around things like maybe PMO planning. Also looking at roles like portfolio analysts, deeper skills around some of the portfolio stuff. And then you also get into things like change services, change management. Indeed, if you find that in an organisation where there are multiple PMOs, you also tend to find more specialised roles within the PMO. So, for example, you may have planning leads, you may have leads that are just purely looking at the benefits management or risk management, for example. One of the things that you'll notice probably on that list is there are no project managers or program managers actually listed. That's because this is all about the actual running of a PMO. And certainly in the UK, the model tends to be that the PMO is purely about the PMO specialists, the people that are working in that supporting delivery role. And it's the deliverers, like the project managers and the program managers, are kind of a little bit out of they're out of that PMO structure, even though the PMO is supporting them. I think the model's slightly different, certainly in North America, where you tend to find the project managers, program managers within that PMO structure. It's always been an interesting one about the differences between the two.
It's really fascinating because it's becoming more, I think it's becoming more and more common where the PMO manager is seen to be supporting the whole of the delivery of projects, and we're getting the project managers reporting into the PMO manager. But the PMO manager essentially fulfills two roles. It delivers the PMOs across the organisation, but also is essentially the delivery manager. So they have a kind of a split personality. So the project managers are there actually leading the projects and leading the programs. And what we're talking about in terms of services is the services the other half of the team provide into those projects and programs.
I mean, I had a question about what, you see in so many roles in PMO. Why is that? It is because you do have many different types of PMOs, as Eileen's already mentioned at the beginning of the session, the project level, the program level, the portfolio. Like, again, different size organisations have multiple PMOs. There could be specialism required within that PMO, just mainly because the industry of that business. You do see different types of PMO workers in construction than you would say from pharmaceuticals into IT or consultancy. So the context of where people are working also lends itself to different types of roles within the PMO. So one of the best ways to show really in terms of some of the roles that we're looking at here is let's have a look at in terms of the roles that people perform. So from a support point of view, so this is often the people within the team that are considered to be the administration level, and they're supporting generally projects and programs and doing that administration type work where it's about organising meetings, it's taking minutes, it's chasing actions, and often it is seen as the entry level role for a lot of people that are wanting to find work within PMO. And I've always said that there's always been this feeling that the PMO is seen as an administration function and they don't do much more than what you're seeing on the screen right now. Not true anymore. I think we'll find as we go through some of the roles that we perform, you'll see just how much this role's expanded and deepened. But in terms of where we see organisations, is that there absolutely still is a role for good old administration and supporting projects. If we look at projects and program portfolios in terms of how much stuff is happening on a day-to-day basis, how many meetings, how many documentation being provided, how many teams need support, we're always going to need these people in order to be able to provide that good administrative support. So in terms of the next type of level of role around PMO is good project and program level support. So these are like the PMO coordinator, the support analyst, that kind of role. And they're doing a lot more in terms of delivery support. What we mean by that is if it's whatever role a project manager and program manager is performing, and they need somebody to work alongside with them to take up some of the slack, help with some of the things that need to happen. For example, maintaining a risk register or pulling together the project reports. These people are just as knowledgeable about project and program management as a project and program manager is. The difference is they are not delivering that project or program, they are supporting it. So in terms of knowledge, in terms of PMO people, they absolutely have to have the knowledge there in order to be able to perform that job well. So the next kind of level that we're looking at for the PMO people is the guidance type level, which is as Eileen has already talked about in terms of things like the Centre of Excellence type thing, where you're providing not just, this is not about necessarily supporting the delivery of projects and programmes, it's more about creating the environment and the ecosystem really that allows all projects and programmes across that organisation to run well. So some of the things you'll see there is, PPM systems and tools and things that need to be put in place. They run across all projects and programmes, developing different processes and procedures that need to happen for supporting projects and programmes. For example, one of the pieces of work that a PMO will do a lot is if we're looking at different parts of project and programme delivery. Let's take risk management as an example. One of the things that they will be looking at is if a continuous improvement type of work where you're seeing things coming out of lessons learned, and it's about the PMO being able to join those dots. So, for example, a PMO would be able to see all the different lessons that are coming out across all the different projects and programmes. It's up to the PMO to be able to spot those trends and to be able to think about what needs to happen so we can stop having the same lessons coming out, the same things that put our projects in jeopardy, and starting to think about how we can change some of these processes. So it's more of a guidance type role. It's in order to be able to do that role, you do absolutely need to know the ins and outs of projects and programme delivery.
Can I just add a little bit to that in terms of, interestingly, in terms of these two roles? Somebody's just asked a question in terms about the various roles, and there is very little alignment across the world, even within countries, about what roles do what. What job descriptions and what job titles do roles in organisations. And this is a really interesting one in terms of kind of the project and programme support and project, it does say programme and programme guidance, but project and programme guidance. Spotted the one mistake, we knew we'd spotted as we go through. Project and programme guidance. We did some coaching for somebody who worked, who was really kind of stepping up from support admin, and she was going in to do a programme and project and programme support role for an organisation. And so we did a bit of coaching. She said, I'm really looking forward, Eileen, to working with a project manager who I can support and help, but they're really going to kind of increase my knowledge and experience of working in and around projects. She did phone me back a few weeks later, really kind of quite devastated, because she had been paired with a project manager who said, I'm really looking forward to having somebody in the PMO who can help and support me learn how to do the various project and management processes, because she was expecting somebody in that support role who could actually provide her with the guidance on how to do those. So even though the PMO individual wasn't necessarily assigned full time to the project, they would be leaning on the PMO in terms of the advice and guidance and what needed to be done. So it's really important, again, to answer the question about being very clear when you're applying for jobs or recruiting for jobs, that you're clear in terms of what it is exactly you're going to want that individual to do when you recruit them.
Can we just jump into another question, because it's a really interesting one that I don't think we've ever chatted about this. And what are your thoughts on having something like a business partner role in the PMO, somebody who's managing the pipeline into the PMO?
The pipeline of work into the PMO.
Well, let's guess that that's what they're saying. Yeah.
So to me, that is really looking at the whole portfolio management piece, in terms of understanding what work and activity needs to be undertaken. And again, the PMO are not the people who decide on what work needs to be undertaken. Either the divisional heads or the managers will decide on what projects and programmes need to be undertaken. And what the PMO are there to do is to provide them with some advice and guidance and perhaps some recommendations on what the implications or of some of the choices that they make. And I remember we spoke at a Project Challenge one year, and we came up with the infamous saying is, when the organisation says, does my bum look big in this? Our view should be, we say, yes, it bloody does. So we are the people who will hold the mirror up to the organisation and help them make the right decisions, but the decision actually doesn't sit with the PMO in terms of what projects we do.
Yes, so there you go. That's the first swear word. Let's hope it's the last one, shall we? I apologise. No, not really. This is a bit about how we tend to talk about these things sometimes.
We like to be open up front.
Indeed, indeed. So let's carry on with some of the. We've got a lot of questions coming in, and just conscious that we also want to get through the session. So if we don't manage to answer some of your specific questions, just remember that we will be able to follow up with you after, because we will have your details from when you registered. So we'll certainly do that. But Eileen will carry on having a look if there's anything else that needs to be pulled up for now. So again, looking at the roles that they're performing. So as we found over, I would say certainly over the last 10 years, that the whole portfolio management becoming such a bigger thing. And from a PMO point of view, that means that there's actually, again, the split between support but also guidance as well. So from a portfolio supporting point of view, this is again where the PMO people are rolling up their sleeves and actually doing that support. So for example, if you have a portfolio manager that is looking at the prioritisation of the projects within the portfolio, the PMO people are there to provide the process, the tools that are required to be able to do that, any kind of support that they can give in terms of actually the mechanics of working through prioritisation. Again, from a PMO point of view, this is just incidentally, benefits management is one of the biggest bugbears for a lot of people that work in PMO, and no doubt it's the same for any program manager on this call. It is one of the most difficult aspects that many people struggle with. So you won't be surprised to hear that when you're talking to PMO people, this is often one of the areas that comes up. And as we were saying before about you have different specialised roles within PMO, it's not uncommon to see people that do specialise in benefits management. So again, this is about being able to provide the process support, the tool support, and any other kind of hands-on support in order to be able to help that portfolio manager. And then from that we have the portfolio guidance, which again is just what Eileen has just been talking about in terms of getting into the strategy development. And one of the things that we have found more is there's more and more people that are working at this end of PMO, getting deep into the portfolio stuff, but they're actually getting involved in strategy formulation as well, because you find that with PMOs, different levels within the organisation, the portfolio one can sometimes be at that, as Eileen mentioned before, at the C-suite, at that executive level, and the role changes again. So right from that left-hand side, you can be, somebody that's quite new to working full stop, that it's straight out of university, that kind of role, all the way up that ladder there, that portfolio level role can often be a role where, you're pulling a wage that will be bigger than a project and a program manager, purely because of the types of work that you're doing and the value of that work to that organisation. So from thinking about the resource point of view, one of the biggest problems we've always had in PMO is that it's been very difficult for people to be able to know what the level is in terms of what makes a good PMO person. We've talked about there's so many different contexts. There's lots of different specialised roles. There's obviously different levels in terms of seniority, and different things that they're supporting, whether it's support or providing that guidance. And essentially what we've been working on over the last 3 years is being able to provide that. And hopefully many of you are already familiar with the ideas of a competency framework and what those are. There's a lot out there for project managers and program managers, but not so much for PMOs. And one of the reasons why is because the PMOs differ in different organisations, but actually there are very much underlying competencies, regardless of what kind of organisation you're working in, how big that organisation is, and the kind of role that you're performing. So, for example, with the new competency framework, which will be out in just next month, these are some of the competencies that we've been able to highlight that that run across all those different types of roles that you've been looking at. So right from the P3M administration. So again, this is about administering and supporting projects, programs and portfolios. We've got the PMO management element. So there, it's about the design of PMOs, the setting up, which is what we're talking about tonight, running and transforming and closing those. The biggest chunk you'll see there is on the bottom left, which is the P3M delivery support. So this is about that, roll your sleeves up, supporting projects and programs across all these different areas. And I don't think there'll be anything on there that you're unfamiliar with or don't recognise. But you'll see, but we pretty much covered everything you could possibly be doing in terms of supporting projects and programs. And that bit on the right-hand side at the bottom is that bit about providing that ecosystem, that environment for projects. So we call that P3M enabling. So we're services that we enable the organisation to deliver projects successfully. And that is the baseline stuff around things like putting good insurance in place, things like capability development, so developing projects and program managers, and of course anybody really who's working within delivery organisation, things like delivery methods. So that's where you've got your bits about putting in place waterfall, agile, whatever it is that you're doing. Hybrid seems to be the word of the day. Things like governance frameworks and P3M tools. So for each one of these, there are sets of what we call indicators, which allow any PMO professional to look at the different aspects of all of these competencies, look at the different indicators, and the indicators give you a good idea about what's expected at different levels of competency. Eileen, do you want to bring anything else in about that?
No, I think the interesting thing is probably what we haven't mentioned yet in terms of the role profiles. So what we've put in the book as a starting point are 4 role profiles around P3 administration, P3M support, P3 or a PMO manager and a PMO director. So we put those 4 role profiles in the competency framework book. What we'll also be putting on the website is a range of other role profiles around things like PMO consultants, and PMO specialists, because they will have a kind of a slightly different take on those competencies. Now, we put the 4 in there because they're the most typical of those 4 roles. And as we mentioned, in terms of the flip between P3M support and P3M guidance sits within that project coordinator role. Some of the other roles we will be looking at further on down the line will be more specialist, but the competency framework is also there for organisations who can create their own roles specific to the work that they do in their organisation. So it really is a starter for 10, and hopefully will help people who are looking to either get into PMOs or to progress into other roles in the PMO, an idea of the areas that they need to develop. So I think Lindsay's gone on to talk about the different components of competence, to say the different elements that you need to look at.
Yeah, well, kind of. I mean, the book's coming and there's a lot of detail in there. But I think in terms of when we talk about different skills and capabilities of people that work in the profession, obviously you can see, the things that very much align to P3M. But of course, one of the things that we don't really talk very much about is is these 3 massively important parts that make anybody competent in their role. And what kind of knowledge do you need if you're working within a PMO, setting up a PMO, managing a PMO, all of those kind of things? What are some of the core skills that are required? And obviously, one of the things that we often don't focus a lot on is the behavioural side of how we do the work, and that often makes a big difference in terms of how successful that we are. So in terms of the things like the knowledge, we go into things like understanding the different kinds of systems that you will need within a particular organisation. With skills, it's things like being able to ask questions, or manage conflict, or those kind of things. And then of course, like behaviours are about being able to challenge, for example. So there's a lot of different aspects that we're looking at, and let's have a look at the knowledge, skills and behaviours. And it's really small. I'm very sorry about that.
Because there's lots of them.
There's lots of them. But these are the bits that, often make a massive difference. In fact, they do make a massive difference to, if you're understanding the world of P3M that you're working within from a PMO point of view, it's these knowledge, skills and behaviours that really do make you into more of a rounded professional. Again, as we said, the reason why we've developed this over the last 3 years and why it's taken 3 years is because there was absolutely a lot to think about. But one of the reasons why we're doing this is that we absolutely recognise just how popular PMOs are becoming. The fact that this is one of the most popular webinars that BCS have been doing, there's certainly something about PMOs really coming into their own right now in terms of helping organisations to deliver their projects and programmes. One of the things that we're very clear about throughout the competency framework is, you are there to support and to offer guidance. You're not, we recognise that you're not delivering, you're not the end decision maker as a project manager, programme manager or portfolio manager. Those are the ones that are in charge. This is all about how you work with and influence those people, how you're working with different teams, how you're working with your customers, and the different types of knowledge that's required. So I think it's probably one of these slides, this slide in particular, that you'll certainly want to get your hands on after this session. So again, we'll just reiterate, you will get these slide decks afterwards.
Somebody's just asked a question about the behaviours, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about the behaviours, because we did spend lots of time working this through about this kind of definition of competence, about being able to do something and do something well. So those of you who know Stephen Covey talks about production and production capability. So not just being able to do it now, but being able to continue to do it. And there are people who we work with sometimes in PMOs, who we can go and ask and ask them to go to a stakeholder to ask them for some input or a question, and we recognise we can only ask them to do that once, because the approach that they've taken, the language they've used, the way that they've approached that individual has not been appropriate and is not conducive to a longer term collaborative relationship. And so we spend quite a bit of time looking at the types of behaviours that would allow us to do the job and do the job well. And there are some interesting behaviours there in terms of being challenging, but we also say act with integrity and with recognising confidentiality, but we still want to go out there and be the critical friend and the challenge partner for a lot of the decisions around the organisation. But how we do that is as critical as the knowledge and the skills in of the individual. And one of the interesting things we've had, having done lots of workshops with various PMOs, when we recruit people, we often recruit people on their skills and their knowledge. And often when we have to let people go, it's because their behaviours have proved to be inappropriate. And so one of the things that we would suggest is that when you're looking to do your recruitment, and certainly when we're looking to support people in using the competency framework, developing those behaviours is going to be key to developing the competence of the people in the PMO.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody who's interested, it's going to be out in February, and it's good old Amazon is probably the best place to get that book. So we're now on to the third element, which was all about success and measurement and metrics, and this is another fascinating area for a lot of people in PMO, and hardly unsurprising, because their organisations should be holding the PMO to account, just as it does its project managers, its program managers. There is no difference. So, Eileen, there's when we introduce this, there's two aspects to it, isn't there, in terms of measurement and metrics?
Yes, there is. And interestingly, we often kind of come across this term called value. And one of the things we just need to be careful about is what we actually measure. So when we talked about kind of setting up the PMO, when we started this, we talked about we're actually set up to help the organisation address their business problems. So it's really interesting in terms of that the metrics and measures should actually help us to address how much we've addressed that problem and how well we've actually kind of performed across the various roles and services that we've provided. And so one of the things we need to think about is whether we're interested in PMO success or P3M success. And there's a great adage that I often quote, which is, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. And so organisations where projects are really successful, well, it's all because we've got really good and skilled project and programme managers that deliver them well. If it goes wrong, it's because the PMO made us waste all of that time doing all of that bureaucratic nonsense and templates to kind of get through the gates, etc. And it's really important that we don't just measure effort, but we also discuss and identify the impact that we have on project and programme success, as well as actually measuring our performance. Now, one of Lindsay's great skills is doing infographics and doodles, and she has provided a fantastic sheet which we will share with you on the various different metrics and measures that real live PMOs have used and do use to measure the success and the contribution of their PMOs. But Lindsay's going to take you through in a little bit more detail, particularly this concept called OKRs, where we can't necessarily, particularly where we work in an organisation with a low level of maturity, we may not necessarily have the initial kind of baseline metrics to be able to identify some specific benefits, as we know the term benefits to be used, and even less chance of being able to put that into pounds, shillings and dollars for our organisation. So Lindsay's going to take you through a couple of other types of metrics that are useful for PMOs.
Yeah, we like OKRs. We're a massive OKR fan. So basically, what we do with PMO Flash Mob is, this is all about listening to people that are currently working in PMOs, the things that they may be struggling with, or the things that they want to know more about. And so we've done a report, and I'll share where you can get the report from, because there's stacks in there about metrics and measures. So the infographic you've just seen, a lot of that is about measuring P3M success. There is some PMO ones in there, but what we learned from in our report is that actually OKRs are really are particularly great for measuring PMO success. So this particular bit that will be really interesting to people that are working within a PMO right now, or if you're managing a PMO right now, it's have a look at them, because they're absolutely probably the right kind of thing to do. So this is all about setting goals for the PMO as well, which for anybody who's working in the PMO, to have a goal as to what your PMO is going to achieve this year or next year or whatever time frame that you're working within, it is great for bringing a team together, the motivation, all that kind of good stuff. So OKRs stand for Objective and Key Results, and in order to be able to do OKRs, you need to be able to have a great objective. And the objective is all about, what is it that you want to do? So it's quite a qualitative thing that you set as a goal, and you're doing it for a set period of time. So, for example, the PMO people that we know tend to do it on quite short. So 3 months, 6 months, or a year, or even quarterly works quite well. And people tend to, maybe have between 1 and 3 objectives. So in terms of the objectives, it's we need things that are inspirational, inspirational to you as a manager, inspirational to the people that are working within your PMO. They've got to be attainable. They've got to be, you've got to have some stretching there, but it's got to be attainable. Nobody likes to feel like they've failed and not been able to get to something, but ultimately, was well out of their reach. It has to be controllable. It has to be within that team's control to be able to even get there, to meet those goals. And it's got to be able to propel the business to achieve strategy. And that's absolutely why a lot of organisations love OKRs, because it's about everybody on your PMO team being able to explain how an OKR, the ones that they're working on, are actually helping the business to achieve its overall strategy. So you can see that link back into, what the business is trying to achieve, and ultimately having an objective for the PMO that shows exactly what it is that they're doing. On the quantitative side, it's all about the actual measures and the metrics. So this is about being able to measure how well a PMO is actually meeting the objectives that have been set. So aspirationally, it has to be a bit of a stretch. And it has to be a little bit of a stretch. It doesn't have to be, I think one of the...
It has to be achievable.
It has to be achievable, but it has to be... it does have to be aspirational too. So there does have to be some stretching there. So for example, if you're setting something at the, we'd like to meet, a 5% hit of getting, better lessons learned using this new process. But if you feel actually that 5% is probably achievable, you might set that at 10% instead. But even if you only met 7%, actually you're still doing 2% over what you initially thought at 5%. It's that kind of aspirational feeling. It's something that's a bit of a stretch, but not too much. It has to be smart. I'm sure many of you are well aware of things like SMART objectives. So it's about being specific and measurable. And I love the quote about it. It's not a key result unless it has a number, which, I think we all recognise when it comes to measurement, there absolutely needs to be that number there. And it has to be progress driven. So you're measuring it all the time throughout the time frame, because it's about being able to see progress. It's that little golden thing that is happening that is motivating people and driving people on. And absolutely, in terms of people that are doing this right now, we don't see many of them. In fact, we're going to be having a session on PMO Flash Mob about this, because it does work. It's brilliant to have OKRs within that kind of PMO setting. So just to bring it to life a little bit more, just to explain it a little bit more, here you can see a real example that somebody has put together for developing their PMO as a centre of excellence that they want people within their business to engage with. And you can see that that's the objective. Then you can see the key result areas that they're going to do in order to be able to try and meet that objective. And there you can see the scorings that they put against some of these key results that they've been targeting and looking at and progressing. So the absolute number that goes with OKRs is 70%. So when you achieve 70% of your goal, you've actually achieved success. And the reason why you can achieve success at 70% is if you've got sufficient stretch in there. So when we're talking about things like making things aspirational, inspirational, as long as you've got enough stretch in there, you never need to reach the 100%, because you would have already started to reach far more than you were going to be doing before you even came across using OKRs. So it's an interesting one. And what is brilliant about doing it is that you can do it obviously as a PMO manager, but you do it with the team. And, that's half the battle when you're setting up PMOs. If you've got a strong PMO team, that is, how you're able to do a great job for the organisation.
And it goes back to kind of where we started this from, in terms of those objectives and key results are very clearly can be aligned back to the objectives that have been set for the PMO from our stakeholders right at the very beginning of the session. So, it all ties back, and we can demonstrate that we are delivering what the organisation has actually set us up to deliver.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the report where OKRs are mentioned, as well as all the other metrics and measures and things like that, plus if you want to get that little download, you can find it all on the Flashmob website. And enjoy. It's one of the most downloaded reports that we do. Lots of different things in there for you to discover. So we're coming towards the end of our actual session. I know we've got there's probably lots of questions that we can pick up in terms of things from the audience. But while we're just having a last look through some of those, somebody asked a question about how you can go about being qualified. Or getting some help in terms of learning the knowledge part, as you were talking about competencies and things. So this is a knowledge side when we're talking about learning and qualifications and things like that. This is all about deepening your knowledge or gaining new knowledge, in fact. Because we're living in the virtual world right now, this course that we've got coming up on the 15th and 16th of February, done in a virtual classroom. It's all about setting up a project management office. It's a very practical course for anybody who's wanting to perhaps broaden their knowledge around PMOs for the first time. Perhaps you're here I know we had a number of people that were not working in any of the roles. You were working in other. I'm absolutely aware that BCS is very good at, getting people on board to its webinars that are looking to get into the field. If you're looking at that, she can also, as Eileen mentioned, she's the author of P3O, and P3O Foundation is probably one of the places to start.
Absolutely.
So, Eileen, any other questions that we need to pick up?
There was a couple of things that kind of go back in terms of this issue about understanding, or the business not necessarily understanding how the P3O can help, and whether we need to get some senior management support. And I think we've covered it, but let me put it perhaps a little bit more plainly in terms of the alignment of how and what we do to set up the PMO in the first place. Very often, as I said, the organisation will not come along and say, I want a PMO. Sometimes it does, and that's great. What they will do is they will talk about some of the issues that they're struggling to address. And very often it's sometimes questions that they don't know how to answer. And sometimes we can be quite provocative by asking them questions that we know they're going to struggle to know the answer to. So, kind of, do we know how much we spent on projects and programs last year? Do we know how many benefits we actually managed to get from that investment? Do we know what were the average overspend on the project? So these are all important things that help them make better decisions. So it's really important that we're there, as I say, not to set a PMO for the sake of having a PMO. We're there to address their business problems. And in terms of authority and getting senior management buy-in, that's done within our PMO mandate. So putting in place the PMO mandate that says these are the problems that we're going to be addressed, these are the services that we're going to be provided, getting that signed off by the mandate, and then playing that back to our various stakeholders and recognising that the person who signed up that mandate is supporting and championing the PMO. They have a role to play as well in selling the benefits and how the PMO is going to help to the organisation.
This is a good question because you like your project management stuff, don't you? What's the difference between change control and change management?
So typically the change control is talking about changes to elements of a project in terms of the scope or the budget. So it's changes to configuration items within the project. Whereas change management is looking at organisational change as a result of the delivery of projects and programmes into the organisation.
Can I just ask her, this is a question we get quite a bit actually, is there a place for a PMO in Agile projects?
Absolutely, and one of the questions I answered earlier on is that their organisation is where they want a single project office to support both Agile and waterfall or traditionally led projects. And regardless of the type of delivery methodology, there is a role to play for the PMO to support the project and program managers and the other roles that sit within the project. But actually it gives them a great opportunity then to synthesize the project metrics and performance to the senior executives, who generally probably don't care how the project is being delivered. What they want to understand is progress and how it's contributing to the organisation.
Yeah. There's a question about how long does it take to get qualified. It's an interesting one because we've been working on the competency framework for the last 3 years. I'm laughing, but it has been a bit of a slog. But it's an interesting one about being qualified and what qualified actually means. I mean, you can be qualified after doing a 3-day course in something like doing a Prince 2, which many of you will be familiar with, makes you qualified in Prince 2. You can same with P3O. You can do a P3O foundation course in 3 days. Does that make you qualified? Not necessarily. I mean, I think what we're trying to do is change that narrative from being qualified to being competent, to be competent in the job, and that takes many years. It takes many years whether you decide to stay within a certain area in PMO, or it can make take many years if you're looking to climb a ladder, from moving different roles from, as we look back at that diagram, from the administration side, getting all the way up into portfolio guidance, it can take many years. So it's about not necessarily being qualified, but being competent in the role. So in terms of questions, we've got quite a few more, and I think some of them are quite I would say quite individualistic to people. So as Sim actually said at the beginning, all the questions will get answered. What happens is the questions get given to us with your details, and we're then able to provide one-to-one answers. For people that are interested on the course itself, like I said, it's virtually available. You can have a look at pmolearning.co.uk and take a look at the specialist PMO courses that we're doing, and you'll see that there. One of the other things that we've mentioned a few times throughout this session is PMO Flash Mob. If you're working within PMO, you absolutely need to have a look at this website. We're not just saying that, bit biased, get it, but there's a lot of stuff on there. We've been going for nearly 8 years now. We've been doing sessions all over the UK, and picking up on many different topics. We've actually got one tomorrow night, which is about the art of the possible. We've had a nightmare year. I think many people will agree. It's just been topsy-turvy, but we've learned a lot, and people have got success stories, and we've got a brilliant one coming up tomorrow from the airline industry. As I'm sure most of you will agree, it was devastated last year, but we have got a brilliant PMO story where they've really been able to help their business, and that's with Virgin Atlantic. And then on February, we launched a PMO competency framework, and you'll be able to join that session if you're interested in that particular piece, and come along and find out more about the competencies itself, a little bit more about the context and the different levels in terms of how competent you are. Lots of things to get into. So if you're really into thinking about your career development, that's one for you. So we're coming up to the end of the session, and we want to say thank you very much.
Huge thank you. We've had loads of people on, and the questions all really help us as well, because we'll get back and do answers to all of those. And if we think there's any more useful information, we'll provide some links as well from the Flashmob website if we've got some old or some previous papers that we've produced.
Yeah, so here we are again. We're probably a little bit more red in the face now. Certainly concentrate doing that. But yeah, it's quite interesting doing it two-headed, because one of us is trying to type the answers while the other one is trying to talk and pulling the mouse off each other. But yeah, hopefully that met your expectations. That setting up a PMO, it's not a one-step. If only you could get a fact sheet to do this.
This is it.
Yes, a lot more to it. But thank you very much for your time this evening. Really appreciate it.
And thanks for BCS for letting us talk.
Thank you.
Oh no, you're most welcome. Honestly, brilliant. So many nuggets, so many takeaways for everybody, and we definitely hit a record, because I think at one point we had about 669 attendees, and we're down to about 500 now, as obviously the evening's gone on. But amazing. Thank you so much.